Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of OK Copy Podcast. Today, we are joined by Lauren Hertzberg, managing partner of Cut and Run. Thank you for joining us, Lauren.
Oh, it's so good to be here.
So happy to have you here. I know being in front of the camera is not your day-to-day.
I'm a post person. We're behind the camera. We're like extra behind the camera.
Yes, it's all good. But we're here to share your journey and share your story and your learnings, hopefully, with an audience that's here to learn as well. So with that, I'd love to start with your journey. Tell us how you got here today, where you started, what got you interested in this post world in general.
Well, so I studied sociology, criminology in college.
Okay.
Because I saw Silence of the Lambs. And I said, oh, Clarice Starling, that looks good, which is kind of, an odd take. But I saw it and I was like, that's what I'm fascinated in. I want to study it. Once I actually got to school and started studying it, it was interesting, but it wasn't really, I realized it wasn't a career path for me. Mm-hmm. So I had this 4-year degree and I was like, oh gosh, like where do I start? Where do I go now? So I got lucky and I ended up working for my dad. He ran a production company. He made B action movies in Los Angeles. And he wanted me to assist the post supervisor. And I didn't know what that even meant. He's like, I think you'll like it. And I said, sure. And then the post supervisor quit before I even started. And my dad said, you're the post supervisor now. And I said, what does that even mean? And he goes, figure it out. And he handed me stuff to do. And I think I probably teared up, and I was absolutely overwhelmed. And I remember this is back in a long time ago before it was digital and it was all negative still. Mm-hmm. And he said, we need an inner positive, which is a way it's a piece, something you need to do with film to go from a negative to a positive. I had no idea what he was talking about, but I went to my boss at the time and he said, call PhotoChem, call this place. Here's who to talk to there. They're wonderful, and ask a lot of questions. And so I absolutely learned on the fly.
Yes.
And then I ended up post-supervising, I think 3 or 4 films over 2 years while I was there.
I did not know that.
Yes.
Okay.
And then, I found post fascinating, and I truly knew nothing about it. But I'm not really an LA girl. I'm definitely more New York. Mm-hmm. And I didn't love being the boss's daughter. I questioned if I was good at my job because you just don't know. Yeah. So I was like, I had a great 2-year experience, but then I left. I went backpacking for 6 months by myself.
Nice.
Because I was like, it's now or never. I was 24 and I was like, this is the time to do it. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up back in Chicago where I grew up, and I bounced around to a ton of jobs. I worked at a hedge fund in the recruiting department. I sold French and English antique country furniture.
Wow.
And then I had this moment of, oh gosh, I'm in my mid-20s. I am all over the place. And I knew that I wanted to work, and I knew that I wanted to do something good and that I was proud of and wanted to be part of. And so I actually got a career coach because I was like, I'm lost at this point. And we talked about my first job, and I did like the post. And then I was in Chicago at the time, and they said, well, what's post like in Chicago? And I'm like, oh, it's advertising. So I faxed. I'm old. I faxed my resume to every post house in Chicago because someone gave me a book, a friend of a friend. It was called the Chicago Production Bible. It was a physical book, and there was 1 page of post. And I actually just absolutely faxed my resume to every post house in Chicago.
Fire.
And luckily, I got 2 interviews out of it.
Okay.
And 1 job. And I started as a receptionist. Uh-huh. And I was super excited for the opportunity, and I walked into the place and I was like, I just feel like this feels right. I was kind of bummed. I felt like I was taking a big step backwards to be in my mid to late 20s, and I was a receptionist again, and I felt like I'd done that already. But I just wanted to take this chance because I felt this company felt like a place, or this industry, and this in post specifically, is really about growing from within. So many of the companies like Cut and Run, where I am now, and so many of our counterparts, it's really about growing from within. Mm-hmm. Like,
started one role.
Like when I was at my first company, White House, I started as a receptionist and I ended up as the EP. Mm-hmm. And same with our EP now, Elise at Cut and Run. She started as reception at Cut and Run. Yep. And now she's our EP.
She's the EP, yeah.
Half the editors on our roster probably started as assistants, if not with us, somewhere, mostly with us though, a good amount of them. So, and that, because that's part of the culture of Post specifically, it's really about it's getting your foot in the door, finding a spot where you think that you can grow and you see people growing and you see the management and you're like, yeah, I feel like they have my back, and you just kind of take a leap of faith, even though it feels like a step backwards.
Yeah.
It's honestly like having that support and having that access to work and clients and mentorship and leadership is, absolutely invaluable, even when it feels like, oh, I feel like I should be farther than I am. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you got to take that step.
Take that step, that leap of faith. And really being okay with having to figure it out. Because it feels like even though your dad owned the company, he definitely made you go figure it out.
Oh, I had there was nothing, it's hard. Obviously even saying it, I was like, oh, it sounds like I'm a Nepo baby. I'm truly not. And I was handed the opportunity, and then everything else from there I created. And I was treated, he wasn't my direct boss. He wasn't even my boss's direct boss. So it was a different part of the company. He dealt with more of the sales side, and I was on the production side, the post side.
Right.
So that helped. But no, it really was. And if anything, it made it, people would literally yell to the office, hey, boss's daughter, go get me that thing.
No.
So it was out there. It was no surprise who I was. And if anything, it was kind of hard.
Yeah.
Because I really questioned, am I a good employee?
Right.
Am I good at my job?
So people may not really be fully honest with you.
Yeah.
Right. Probably more so say it behind your back, if anything, just because.
And I had people that met me because they wanted to get into the industry, and they knew, oh, well, maybe, I was new to the city. I didn't know anyone in LA, and I felt like people were trying to be my friend just to get in. So
that sounds very LA.
Oh, I know. It was. I know there's wonderful parts of LA, and I love hiking and.
Well, I love the landscape. Don't love the city so much.
I don't know. I got to New York and I was like, oh, I'm home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting, the part about growing in, what did you call it? Growing?
Like growing within.
Growing within the company. I love that. And I did not know that so many of your editors also started in the company, or Elise, who's phenomenal, by the way. He's worked with us on the Reels.
Yes.
But that leads to what I've always observed, without even knowing that, how close of a relationship you all seem to have. Whether I see you online, when I saw you all at AICP, it's just one big family. And so I'd love to hear from you, what it means to cultivate that within Cut and Run. And continue to build a community within your company?
Yeah, no, it's such a good question. For me, and I always say, it's one of my, I have a couple of taglines. One of my lines is I can train someone to be an assistant. I can't train you to be nice. Mm-hmm. So I really think about, when we're bringing new people in, how are they going to fit with the community we currently have, and what are their goals? Because, there's going to be some long days. It's a rough business sometimes, but you want to be surrounded by people that are really all in there taking care of each other. Mm-hmm. We also try to set up an office that isn't competitive. I really, go out of my way to try to make everyone feel they're treated equally, whether it's our assistants, our producers, our editors. I really want everyone to know they're getting as much attention and time and thought to their careers as the next person. And then so when something comes up, everyone's willing to jump in and help each other, because it's not going to affect them negatively to do so. So it's setting up an environment where everyone feels like they're heard, they're part of the team. We also try to go for transparency at all costs, because there's nothing worse than you see, a closed door thing and you're wondering how's that going to affect me? What does that mean? Right. We really try to keep things as open and honest as we can within the company, just so, obviously not every single piece. There's some things you need
Gotta get
but
close. Yeah.
as a manager, but whatever we can do to kind of make people feel like they're part of the conversation.
And do you encourage like inner mentorship as well? So even if it's not from leadership down, editors are helping each other, assistants are helping each other.
I mean, that was one of the best parts about being back in the office more, and one of the hardest parts of being remote, because I loved nothing more than to walk down the hall and see two editors in a room together looking at cuts.
Yes.
And they're talking about the edit. Maybe the client hasn't been in yet. Oh, can I show you my edit before my client comes in? And it was just like, they'd pull in assistants to get their take. Assistants will pull in editors if they're doing, socials or whatever they're cutting. And it's just, I love watching everyone work together. And our producers too, we all sit in one room. I don't have my own office. I sit with all the producers.
Do you?
I do. And I love it. In my last spot, I had my own office, and it felt really isolating. And people only came to my door with problems. And the problem face, I just hated seeing it. And so, if I'm in the room, sometimes I'm hearing things and I can try to help guide things before they're a problem. But B, I'm already part of the conversation. I know what's going on. And I think that also really helps our younger producers grow. They're hearing Elise and I talk. They're hearing us, how we approach, and, everyone in the room is hearing how we approach any issue that comes up on a given day. And I think that really helps. That's a really good mentorship on the production side as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's insight on that, critical thinking and problem solving that you tend to lean into more in a leadership position, but it also strengthens their abilities as editors and prime them maybe for leadership and what that looks like.
And they're hearing our conversations. Obviously they're, sometimes I'm stepping out of the room, but if I'm on with a client, they're hearing me talk about, how do I approach the project? How am I selling our team? How am I talking about our company? And they're hearing that as well.
I love that. So you kind of told us, you said Silence in the Lamb, but post being, it's such an integral part of the creation process.
Yes.
Right? And it comes with so much pressure. We all are like, okay, if we fuck up, we know we can fix it in post, right? Shit, this didn't go right. Sorry, excuse my French. We're going to fix it in post. Post comes and saves the day. Really, though, and really rounds out any type of anything that we come up with, right? Any idea is truly brought together through your lens, your team's lens, etc. What is it that made you choose this side of the business? Choose to even stay, right? Because even though you started there, you could have went into... And going into Chicago with advertising, you could have went into anywhere.
The things I love about Post, from a producer aspect, is I love making a calendar. I will nerd out over a calendar, a schedule. I like figuring things out. There's all these puzzle pieces. Here's our creative. Who do things to match? I love making reels. I love matching creative talent to the creative work that comes across my desk. Nice. It's really fun when you're just given okay, here's our budget, here are our dates, here's what we're thinking, and it's putting together a team, putting together a workflow, and I love that part of it.
What do you use for your scheduling?
I mean,
just Excel?
Okay. Yeah.
Still no technology.
I mean, there was
no other software.
Technology. I used to do it on paper.
Fair.
So.
Oh, wow.
I know.
I don't go that far back.
I'd be literally no. And I used to, even when I haven't produced a job in, quite some time now, but I truly used to print out a calendar and I would write out to count the days.
Squares.
Yeah, to count days, for how many edit days we needed.
Yes.
I'm very tactile that way.
Let's talk about your approach to building your client roster. You guys have a phenomenal roster.
Yeah.
One of the most renowned post houses. All of the big names that you've touched the work of pretty much every major Fortune 100, Fortune 500 brand at this point. How did the company get to a point to have such an outstanding roster? And and I know that you came in and have elevated it, or maybe have continued to build on what the team already started at Cut and Run, but also what are you guys doing to continue to get such great opportunities?
I think it's really twofold. I think it's the talent we have on our roster.
Okay.
Well, I'm not going to say threefold. The talent we have on our roster, it is the support we have from our producers and assistants, and it's the relationships we have with our clients. Client, agency side, production side. It's really about when I joined Cut and Run, it was already a fantastic roster, and I was super happy to be part of it. And I feel very lucky with the partners I get to work with and our editors and our team. But, we are very thoughtful about the work we go after, how to build our editors' reels. This is going to probably come up later. We talk about budgets. Sometimes you take on a job because it's for the relationship. Sometimes take a job for the budget. Sometimes take a job for the creative. Ideally, it's all three.
Right.
But, barring that, like sometimes you will take on a project that is underfunded, knowing creatively it can really change someone's reel. So we sit down with every editor. We talk about what kind of work do you want to be working on? Do you have aspirational directors you want to be working with, or brands you want to be working on? How can we try to access that? Like sometimes, it's easier said than done. Sometimes we kind of joke about manifesting a lot. We kind of say something, next thing you know, like we're getting these amazing calls. So sometimes just kind of putting it out there, what we want and what we're looking for.
Nice.
Is just a kind of a great starting place. And then, we really are thoughtful creatively about the direction we want to be going in. And then, over the years, you build these great relationships. And then as our director friends and agency folks move around, they're moving to new places, they're introducing us to new people. So it's really kind of, Post really is a client service business as much as it's a creative business.
Yeah.
It's, you're really like, you've seen or if you haven't seen our offices, you walk into this massive office with a ton of rooms and a kitchen, and it's really set up to feel like a place you can, our clients can come in and just kind of exhale.
Yeah.
They've been, the creative's been working on a project maybe for, a whole, 6-8 months at this point.
6 months at least.
They come off a massive shoot, they're exhausted, and we're the last push. They're putting it in our hands. They're trusting us to get over the finish line with them. And we just want them to feel like, sit back, like exhale for a second, and we got you, and let's do this together.
I love it. With that, you mentioned your talent, that being a big part. What are the considerations that you talked about your talent. What do you look for in editors when you're considering bringing them on to the roster? And what makes one essentially qualified to join such an esteemed company?
That's such a good question. The reel, just be upfront, the reel does make a difference because it's how I'm selling the editor to our clients. So if I can't put together a reel yet to show what you're about, maybe you're not ready. And that happens a lot, taking a step backwards, even for our it's the assistant editors who want to get to the next level. And it's like, if you need that reel, you need the relationships, really both. It's like, what relationships are you bringing to the table as the editor, the work you're doing. And then really it's a bit of a, it is a personality, it's a gut check. It's like, how are you going to work with a team? How are you with your clients? So much what happens in the room is getting the team comfortable and helping kind of steer the ship. Because creatively, they might have one idea. Sometimes it gets captured during the filming. Sometimes it doesn't. So now it's like, now we're in the room. So now what? And it's how, it's obviously being able to edit is vastly important. But it's how do you get people to try new things? How do you get people to see your vision? And how do you collaborate with people so they feel like it's their vision too? And finding editors that have, some people just have that knack. They you just watch them work and you can't believe what they've, come, or you see the material they had and what they can create with it. And I love that. So it really is the creative side of it's so important. I feel like a lot of editors have different, things they kind of bring to the table. Like maybe it's they're amazing at picking tracks. Like their music choices are just spot on every time.
Right.
Maybe it's sound design. We have a lot of editors that do their own sound design. Yes, it goes on for finishing and it gets mixed, but a lot of times a couple of our editors, their sound design almost always makes it to the final.
Nice.
Maybe it's, there's a handful of things it could be that they're bringing to the table beyond just their basic skill set.
Right. But one thing that you said that stood out, though, is being able to sell their creative, right? And being able to carry their own weight in the room with the client, whether it's a creative director or producer, whomever they need to convince that this is what they see and this is how they saw the piece. I think sometimes the perspective is, I'm a creative or I'm an editor and I can just be in this dark room and just like be my bubble. And it's no.
Yeah. No, I mean, ideally you get the bubble for a day or two.
Right.
And then you're working with a director, and then you and the director are getting to a place where you're happy. And now you're working with the creative team, and now you're working with their bosses, and now you're working with the client, and now you're working with how many levels up. So there's so many, it's interesting about it earlier today. I'm like, yes, I was a sociology major, which seems a little random on surface, but it's so much about like people and connectedness and society and working together. And so much of the post process is work,
collaboration.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What needs to absolutely be included in a reel? Because you say, gotta have a reel, have to be able to sell you. What does that mean? Like maybe if there are one or two things that are like a must have if someone's sending a reel over to you, is it a minimum amount of spots? Is it like 3? For me, with directors, I need at least, now, I didn't know this before, but now I need like 3 spots minimum.
Yeah.
Maybe 5, So what are those things for you from the post side?
We normally do, and I mean, it's arbitrary. I feel like I'm usually doing like an 8 spot reel is kind of like the gold standard.
Okay.
Like it'd be great to have like 8 solid spots.
8.
Yes.
Okay.
I definitely sent out, like earlier today, I sending out 6 spot reels. Like sometimes if the spot isn't serving the purpose and it just takes someone out of watching it, I won't include the work. Okay. But if you're like, go out on a website, like you really want to be able to go like, and if the rest of the editors have at least 8 spot reels and you're on this big roster or even a small roster, you want to be able to match and have, feel like an equal on the roster.
Right.
So I feel like, people want to see, is it a brand they like, is it a director that's hot? Is it, or is it a music video that everyone's excited about? Is it, but everyone has a different, there's, comedy editors. It's like, maybe it's, working with some of the top comedy directors. If it's a music video, it's definitely like the artist. And just, or, it's like the level of the work. It's, they want to see. It is interesting because I feel like you learn that everyone watches reels differently. And so you don't know who's on the other end watching it and what their takeaway is. I love when clients say to me, you know what, I know what my team wants. Drop this spot and move the spot to the second position. And it actually was when that was what I was working on when I rolled up here.
That's what I was working on when you walked in here.
No.
Yeah. Because our sales rep will be like, move this around. Yeah. Like, put it in this order. I'm like, okay.
I had an agency producer be like, he was like, I know what my team likes and I know what they're looking for. And I think your reel is close. But if you did this, that would help me sell your team through to my team. And I was like, oh, I love that.
Appreciate that honesty.
Because then then I learn from it too. And it's like helps me think about reels in a new way. So for me, it's really, it's nice to have a depth of reel because then you have access, because people get so specific. And back in the day, everyone had a reel and it was on DVD or even farther back, a different format. And so you had one reel and it had to really show everything you wanted to show. But now I make every reel bespoke. There's not a reel that goes out that I don't think about the order and think about the spots on it. Right. So the more work you have, the more access I have to make different types of reels for you, to have access to different types of work.
Simian or wire drive?
We're wire drive.
Okay, we're Simian. Now, what about those that don't have commercial work yet? What would you advise an up-and-coming editor that maybe has done maybe one music video or...
I feel like, and it's so interesting.
Not so sexy.
I know, right?
Things like, do they become an assistant editor or do they do spec work or do they do both?
If if they want to be at a shop like ours, they become an assistant editor or a senior assistant or a cutting assist. And they take that opportunity because you're going to have access to the mentorship. You're going to have access to, like, every job that comes in needs socials cut for it now. So maybe the editor is doing the main work and our assistants are doing the socials. So now you're building your reel with socials, but you're also meeting agency teams, you're meeting directors, and you have access to all those potential clients in a way. And you have access to, you know, if you get in with an editor, you know, maybe it's a big package. Maybe it's 6 spots. Okay, well, the editor is cutting 4 and the assistant's taking on 2. Well, now you have 2 spots for your reel. Right. And so is it kind of going back to what I was saying earlier about, I took that step back to become a receptionist and it felt not fun, but I did it because I can see where I was needed to go. I feel like assistants have that ability. And I've seen editors, like someone we promoted recently, he was more on the flame and finishing side. He knew he wanted to be an editor, took a step back, became an assistant, and just really put the work in, and now has this like amazing killer reel, and he's doing great.
Awesome.
And so it's really about having the, like, even though it feels like, if it feels funny, it's like that gut check of where do you want to go? And you know, that's, I guess one thing I'll say, you ask what's kind of hard about our industry, and it's time, man. Like, everyone wants to be an editor tomorrow, and it is, editing specifically, like, it is just, it's years of skill. It is, because every job you learn something you're going to take on to the next job.
Right. So
you have an issue and you can't figure something out, and something didn't work well with the team or whatever it's going to be. You learn from it, and the next job you're going to handle it differently. You know, one of my favorite editors once said, you know, when somebody he did something quickly, and they're like, wow, you did that in 5 minutes. It's like, well, I did that in 20 years in 5 minutes.
Right.
Because he took that 20 years of experience into every job he does.
Yes.
So
that's in every role.
Yeah.
I'd say in production too. Production or live action production, being a producer, live action producer, there are decisions, or even whipping up a schedule. For instance, it may take my producer today still a day. It's going to take me like less than an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's 15 years of experience of doing stupid schedules. I can't believe you love schedules. It's my least favorite thing. I love the budgeting, though. I love budgeting and putting that together, which does lean into the schedule. Yes, you have to do that as well.
You have to do both.
You have to do both.
You can't do one without the other.
And then also ADing has become... ADing and building an AD schedule has become a natural thing for me. Probably from so many shoots not being able to afford an AD and having to do it. Yeah. Especially when I was doing like fashion and luxury commercials where that role, for whatever reason, is just not the norm.
No.
And so the producer has to figure out the run of show. But it works to my advantage now, because in bidding, I'm already thinking about the full day, 10 hours, like how that's being worked through to justify whether or not another day is needed.
No, I mean, that's exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of also why I love that I started as a receptionist. I can go back, you know, I can sit here all these years later and say that, because, like, honestly, when you work at a smaller company, like, it's all hands on deck sometimes. And if our client service team is busy, like, I will make a cheese plate, because if that's what my time is best used for, that, you know, because we're on a crazy schedule, and, you know, the clients coming in, or who knows what, like, I'm comfortable just going in and doing, because I did it for so many years, and I have like the muscle memory of what it was to have all those roles. And I've done all the roles, so I appreciate, and on the producer side, so I appreciate, and I also appreciate that it's hard sometimes, and it's frustrating, and I get it, because I was there and I sat with it, and and I love that for editors too. And so many of our editors, like, they get what it's like to be an assistant. Like, there's not, like, the crunchiest time is that time where you're like on the cusp, and you're building your reel, and you have a client or two, but you're not on the roster yet, and it just feels so uncomfortable. And it never gets easier. And I've gone through, I've helped dozens of editors get from one to the other, and it's just painful. Yeah. And I don't blame them. And I, like, appreciate, and I just hope that they, like, you know, ride it out and trust.
Trust the process.
Trust the process, and trust, you know, if you're at a company that you really like, trust the people that are, you know, guiding your career.
For sure. And saying, like, just take this job. Trust me. It's going to look good on the reel. We're doing that a lot with our roster. right now, which is fun only because they trust us. And so we're building together, which is great. I want to make sure I don't forget to ask, how does one find an assistant editor job?
Oh, yes. Very important. Well, it's interesting too, because even at our company, we'll take a step back. Like a lot of our client service and our vault team move into our assistant roles.
Wow.
So the person we just promoted, a junior assistant editor, we promoted her out of our vault. Nice. And now she's our, next junior.
Out of your vault?
Yeah. So a vault position is like, it's like they track all the media. They're tracking all the computers. We know now, because we're hybrid, figuring out every week where everyone's going to sit.
Nice.
It's really a tech role and also a media role, and making sure we kind of, they're checking everything in as we get the drives in.
Okay.
But it's really
an important part of the process to know. Yeah.
So obviously the company needs it. And then also
Rashid, that's here with us today. That's what he does for 19th.
So
outside of, but he also can do camera operation, and he's also an amazing photographer. So we lean into him.
I love that.
As we need. But he keeps our company operating. That's for sure.
And then, but it's also he's probably learning so much hands-on, and that's what we like with the Vault too, because they're seeing they're uploading all of our work to WireDrive. So they're helping us put our website together when we have new reels to put up, or we're changing our editor's reels, because we're constantly changing the reels to put the newest work on it.
Nice.
So they're getting really hands-on with the work, and then in the downtime, they're learning from the assistants.
Right.
So, but I mean, honestly, I think it's always worth dropping an email. I think it's important to, just, have your resume together, obviously, and you don't need cover sheets. I don't know. People sometimes get a cover sheet, and I'm like, you don't have to do that.
Still.
I know. It's like, it's very funny. There's certain things people just kind of still do.
Yeah.
Like sometimes, I'll have people come in like a suit to an interview.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, oh, your parents told you to wear a suit to an interview. And it's like, no, just like, obviously, like, you want to be presentable, but you're coming into a creative space. Like the way we're dressed today is the way people dress at our offices.
Yes.
And like, you want to be thoughtful. You don't want to come in and like,
suits scare us.
Well, yeah, it's like
don't wear a suit to our offices.
You would just it would be off-putting. It's like, no.
It's like, are we in trouble? Are you the feds?
But yeah, I think especially for me, because that's how I got started. Like someone saw my resume and took a chance on me.
Right.
I also think a invaluable piece of advice I got is, because as we heard from earlier, I had all these random jobs, and I met with someone, and he was like, the piece you did at the film company is the most relevant to what you're trying to do. He's like, it doesn't matter that's 3 in, beef it up. That should be like the heftiest part of your resume. And the other pieces are relevant. And it's like, clearly what I'm doing now, the art side of things and the furniture side of things, I learned about aesthetic, and there was a creative component to it, and recruiting, obviously it's helpful when I'm hiring people now. So a lot of what I did does lead into what I'm doing now. But really the bulk of it was when I worked in post-production. So he's like, just because it's 3rd in, you don't have to make it equal. Everyone doesn't have to be 4 lines. Like the ones that are the most relevant to what the job you're going for, like really like
beef those up,
triple those up,
That's great advice. Yeah.
And I think that's how I end up, I don't know if without that, if I would have gotten, who knows, but I feel like it did help me get those interviews.
Yeah. I think also like, if you have a list of 50, reach out to all 50.
Oh yeah.
And also follow up. Yeah. For us to land thick and thin, I think I emailed 45 reps.
Really?
Spoke to 5. They weren't even in the list, actually, but they were recommended by someone else.
I love that.
That wasn't by Julie from Champion.
Oh,
that
nice.
Wasn't taking on anyone on her roster. But I kept, being a little annoying, honestly, following up and bugging.
But that's the best part, is because, there are people that I've met with that we just don't have a role for, but I am friends with all of my counterparts.
Right.
So I'll talk to the EPs and, MDs of all the other post houses in New York. And if they say, we'll send an email to a group saying, hey, I met someone great. If anyone needs them, here's their resume. So you don't know when you send your resume whose hands it might end up in.
Right.
which I think is really great too.
The last thing I want to talk about is your pricing structure. And really, and you talked a little bit about budgeting before, but what are the things that you're considering, and how do you guys go about crafting your budgets, which you mentioned earlier to me, which is new, but I just want you to say it again. It makes sense, but I didn't.
You mean the day?
The day rate. Yeah. It's like, duh, everyone's on a day rate. And I guess that's technically how we budget for you in our budgets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's certain budgets are tricky, especially this year. I feel like budgets are a little tricky.
This year's a wash. You could just throw it away. Just throw it away, start fresh. Let's end Q4 with some kumbayas. We're manifesting in this room right now. I talked about manifesting. This is us manifesting. A phenomenal 2024.
That's what nonstop. So sometimes, we are working backwards to hit a number, because we know, a lot of times they come to us with a ballpark or a budget. So I always look at that and think, seeing what they need, and it is a day rate. So the amount of days, do the deliverables they need done and the amount of days they need match their budget?
Okay.
If they do, great. If they don't, then it's like, that's when I get to be creative. And it's like, is it with a cutting assistant as well? Is there a way that we're splitting time in a way? Where can we find efficiencies? Perhaps we can go faster. Maybe they have a really extended calendar. Maybe we can be smarter about and rethink their calendar from a post lens. Mm-hmm. And just it's always conversations. It's getting on the phone. That's what I'll always say. Once you're in the job, it's, no emails, phone calls.
Yes.
Especially for the hard conversations or the thoughtful conversations where you just want to get through with someone and sit with them. And it's like, we really do consider our agency folks our partners. So it's, hey, we all want the same thing. We want to make great work together. So how are we going to do that? How do we get there together? Mm-hmm. And kind of talking it through to find a way, is it cutting the schedule? Is it, being thoughtful about using a cutting assistant with an editor? Is it that we're, taking there's just so many ways you can approach it.
Yeah.
To try to make the numbers make sense.
Is there a formula to the deliverables? Like a 30-second can take XYZ days?
Yes.
A 15-second.
I like to think about
at least 2 days.
I like to think about also shoot days.
Yes.
Because
that tells you how much content you're ingesting.
Yeah. Because also, but also how many cameras.
Yes.
Because truly for each shoot day, you have to have at least a day to screen. Mm-hmm. And that's where even maybe you can start selecting that time, maybe not, depending. Some directors really like to let the cameras roll. Mm-hmm. And we also know certain directors we know really well, if this director, okay, we better set aside, a day and a half per screening. Okay. Just because of the amount of footage that's going to come through. And then, for a documentary piece, for example, and comedy stuff, it's usually more scripted, it goes faster and it's an easier. So you have to kind of assume a day per shoot just to screen and then cutting from there. But really it's about how quickly the team can work through it, mm-hmm. and then how many layers at the agency and how many layers at the client. And are there down days? What's the turnaround? Sometimes they'll need 24 hours to get back with notes. Right. If there's celebrities involved, that becomes a whole other thing.
Other extra round of approval, yeah. We're going through that right now. Weekends equal rush fees.
Weekends should have overtime attached to it.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
It gets, it's a little... And it changes if it's unsupervised weekend time versus mm-hmm. supervised.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah.
Last thing, any tips for editors and or tips for clients or people that may be looking to come to Cut and Run?
I love that.
For some work.
Tips for editors. I say keep building your reel, keep making those relationships, because the relationships are really going to get you where you want to go. It's a director asking for you on a project. Mm-hmm. It's an agency calling in your reel. So keep those relationships going. do whatever you can to meet new people and keep the current relationships tight. I think that is huge. It's all, and then, it's relationships also. Like I stay close with, really all my old editors. Like even if we part ways and I go to a different company or they go to a different company, some of my closest friends are still some of my old editors. Like, it's a small business and we're all kind of in it together. And it's great I have people reach out all the time with questions and I'm always happy to answer them because, we're all, like I said, we're all in this together and we got to take care of each other. Tips for clients. Call us. No, but truly it's like even saying earlier, like if you see something on a reel and you feel like there's something I can do better to have it be better received, to have access to the work, like let me know. If there's, and feedback is so great. Sometimes people don't even reply when you don't get a job.
Yeah,
and
it's the worst.
Like, and it's not, I'd much rather know we didn't get it. And I'd much rather understand who did, just so I can help. It helps me learn. And it helps, and it's listen, it's a business for all of us. And I totally get that. So it's just, I think to me, just the camaraderie of it all and is wonderful.
But I agree with everything that you've said, even throughout all of this. From collaboration is key. Supporting one another, both intercompany and throughout the ecosystem as a whole.
Absolutely.
Is extremely important. Building your reel. Yes. And I think that goes for every role. Editor, producer, director.
Yeah.
Building your role with your reel with intention.
Yeah. Another piece of advice I just thought of, is especially for the younger folks coming up, is like get to know your peers. Really important to know the people like in the industry across all the disciplines that are in your peer group, and because you're going to grow together and those are your next relationships.
Diversify your network.
Yes.
Most importantly, roles, age, race, everything across the board.
Absolutely.
Geography.
Absolutely.
Well, this was lovely. Thank you for coming in front of the camera for us today.
Oh, it was so nice.
You shared so much. Bid post is a big part of it. I love to sit in with editors, probably too much because usually it's not my job, but I like to sit in. But I think understanding the back end and even understanding like the importance of the vault to the assistant editor, to the editor role, that was a new learning for me, and hopefully for all of you home watching. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of OK Copy, and thank you, Lauren, for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, that's a wrap, y'all.